What's up, SVSers, and welcome back to another Audiophile Happy Hour. We are super excited to be here. It is scorching hot around the country right now, so I am sitting in my air-conditioned basement, and I'm just happy to be talking to everyone. And of course, I have my two colleagues here as always, our National Training Manager, Larry Magoo. The Larry, how are you doing today, Larry?
I am fantastic, sir, and yes, it is hot.
Yeah,
I know Gary. We try not to talk about the weather, so we
try not to dwell on that too much. And of course, our CEO and president of SVS, Gary Yakubian. Gary, how the heck are you today?
I'm living the dream, guys. I mean, this is, first of all, as always, I'm so happy to be doing our show, reconnecting with our community. I'm looking at the comments; they're all so positive. People are like stoked, and we are as well. This is a highlight. Somebody wrote that it's the highlight of their month, and we need to talk to that person about their month, how they spend their month. But it is, I'm going to say it's the highlight of my week. I really look forward to these. I'm really happy to be with everyone. And actually, we have some stuff we've done, Larry and I, some traveling that I would catch people up on if they want to hear.
Yes, and of course, I have to say hello to the community. I see all the nice greetings there coming in, and feel free to post where you're tuning in from. We love to see what parts of the country and the world. I saw somebody tuning in from the Philippines earlier. So
I saw Barbados.
Yeah, you got to be up pretty late if you're tuning in from the Philippines, but we love the worldwide presence. So thank you to all
actually
of you.
Early.
Yeah, is that right? Well, my time clock's
very early in the morning there.
And for anyone who is joining us for the very first time, we have some rituals that we have here. And one of the favorite rituals, I would assume, would be the giveaways. And we have 4 fantastic giveaways tonight. And as is our custom, I'm going to have Larry tell you what those wonderful giveaways are. And Larry, what are they?
Good thing I still have them right here in front of me so that I don't look like an idiot right now. But yeah, we got 4 giveaways as usual. We've got a pair of Prime Wireless powered bookshelf speakers, an SB-1000 Pro Subwoofer, a pair of Prime bookshelf speakers, and then to wrap it all up at the end of the night, a PB-1000 Pro Subwoofer. So some of our newest products we're going to be giving away tonight.
Very nice. And to be eligible, all you have to do is leave a comment. So everyone tuning in from North Dakota to Michigan to Utah to California, you're all eligible just for leaving that comment. And I guess I should extend another hello to our behind the scenes folks here helping us out. That would be Vince, who's helping choose the winners. We're not going to give out his information because we don't want him to become susceptible.
Right.
And then Eli, who is going to be grabbing some of your questions. So if you're putting up questions in the comments, we are monitoring them, and we'll try to get to as many as possible as we hit our lightning round Q&A toward the end of the broadcast.
Well, we're even asking Eli during our guest segment that if you have questions for him, he's a really interesting guest from the pro audio recording space, and he's actually a manufacturer, so it's really and a brand. So it could be really interesting, and I know he'll be interested to hear your questions and answer them.
That's a nice teaser, Gary. Our special guest for the evening is David Roman. He comes from Universal Audio. It's an iconic pro audio brand that we'll talk a little bit about here as we get into things, and have some great questions for him as well. But like Gary said, leave your questions in the comments, and we can bring those up and drop them on David as we get forward. And then, of course, we'll end with our lightning round today. Ed will not be joining us. He has a loss in the family, so we appreciate Ed's contributions, but he's got this one off as we show some love for him, and feel free to show love to Ed as well. But it is our custom to talk a little bit about what we've been tuning into recently, and I know you guys have been on the road, which generally means SVS demos. So Larry, I'm gonna start with you first because you guys were out there and showing off some of our gear to some dealers out in Texas. So what have you been tuning into recently?
Well, haven't had the chance to watch a lot of movies recently. I did buy some new ones. So I picked up A Quiet Place 2 on 4K and Raya and the Last Dragon. So I'm looking for, I saw Quiet Place 2 in theaters a couple weeks back. So that was exciting. Watching everything going on with free agency in the NBA and stuff and some TV shows. And I'm ready to get in there and watch Suicide Squad really heavily. And demo-wise, we did a whole bunch of cymatics, a whole lot of Bob Dylan, some Billie Eilish, and just kind of played around with some new tunes while we had some meetings.
Very cool. And I assume you have your normal beverage of what, cherry Coke or something?
Yeah, regular Coke tonight. I didn't feel like going anywhere because 104 outside, so I stayed inside like you with the AC.
Well, I know Gary's going to have his wings today, right? Is that right, Gary? Red Bull?
Sorry? My
Red
what?
Bull. You got your wings.
Yeah. I got my Red Bull. So I'm excited to.
Nice plug.
I'm pumping myself up for our show.
That's right.
But I really don't need to, because I was thinking about our community as I was in San Antonio with Larry. Smith was there, although I missed him because of my travel, and Monique and Ken, who you guys know from the in-store events. And we met with all these dealers from ProSource, which is kind of a sort of a buying group collective of the top dealers in the U.S. And it was really cool watching, we hadn't seen any of these people for 18 months, and just watching how excited they were about the SVS brand, right, Larry?
Oh,
and
man.
we were the only people at this event, I can guarantee you, that was demoing Billie Eilish, which I thought was funny. And, because a lot of these guys are, seasoned old industry kind of pros. But it was, I am obsessing over that Billie Eilish album, just for the record. I think the new one, it's really good. It's very grown up. And I definitely recommend it to the SVS community. It's also mixed in a really interesting way. It's just got a lot of weird, interesting textures to it, which we proved in our demos during ProSource. Don't you think so, Larry?
Oh, very much so. And I think we had a lot of fun. And getting back out there again was really interesting too. And
we had fun. It was great.
And
the other thing I'm watching, which I'm embarrassed, but I have to say it, is this Netflix show, Outer Banks. I don't know who's seen it, but it's about these basically teenagers trying to find gold, treasure, something. It even makes what's that karate show you like?
Cobra Kai.
It even makes Cobra Kai seem sort of intelligent, but I do watch it. I've been binging it. So
Gary's really a teenager at heart. If you think about the Kissing Booth and Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish, and all
Kissing Booth 3 is coming out.
I thought of you immediately. I was like, oh man, we're gonna have to hear about it.
Well, in my glass tonight is my new favorite cocktail, which is kombucha, and some of that purple gin that you made me buy, Gary, for our little group tasting there.
So, that stuff is good.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm doing something healthy for my body by mixing it with kombucha. And now I'm seeing trucks that sell hard kombucha, so I feel like I was ahead of the curve on that one, but I don't want to take too much props for there. And I saw Riot and the Last Dragon, which I thought was phenomenal. A lot of great bass sequences in there, and just a good story overall. And then I was embarrassed to go and actually see Space Jam in the theaters. And I'm not a huge LeBron fan, but like that whole movie's just like, just singing his praises. And it was just a little, I don't know. I brought my kid there because we needed to get out of the house and my wife had something to do. Hi, Alex. And I wasn't a big fan of that. But there's a huge album anniversary, Gary, and I wanted to put you on the spot and see your reaction to it. The Who's Next will turn 50 years old this weekend. You had any poignant thoughts about the Who's Next album turning 50 and just in general?
When I was a kid in high school, the Who helped me get through those hard times of high school. I don't think a lot of their music has aged that well, but Who's Next has. It's a really great album. But you know what else is at 50th anniversary I just read, which has aged really well, is Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. Now, I know that sounds like if you don't know it, it sounds like a gross sort of concept. It's actually probably the first, along with Miles Davis' Bitches Brew, they made it almost at the same time, first jazz rock kind of fusion album. And it's just incredibly listenable even to this day. That's another thing, it just triggered me when you said that. That's another thing I've been listening to because it's just great. And the music aged really, really well. But so does Who's Next.
Well, I've espoused my love for Frank Zappa on here and actually recommended the biography or the movie documentary about him, which is just a fascinating guy. So if you haven't checked that out, there's another recommendation, I guess
that's good. I agree with you.
And we do have to share, since on our last broadcast we did some playlist building, and I challenged Larry to remember what it was, and I had to remind him. But we did songs that you'd love to christen your system to. So if you look in your comments now, I'm going to post a link to our Spotify and our YouTube channels, which have these two playlists shared. Vince, thank you for putting those together. So you can take a listen to those, and we will still compile them and add some songs to them if you have additional recommendations for the first song that you like to listen to when you buy a new piece of audio gear, whether it's a speaker, amplifier, AV receiver, whatever. We got a nice little 3-hour playlist there of songs to christen your listening system.
I couldn't believe how many of you said Dolly Parton 9 to 5. It was crazy the amount of you that put that in there.
And I'm not going to do this playlist today, but I really, really want to do a songs to mow your lawn to, because I was looking for a playlist on all my music services, and there was none that was really worth listening to. So we won't do that one today, but for a future broadcast, I love to listen to music when I mow the lawn. So maybe we'll have to do that one.
What do you listen to when you mow your lawn?
I just listen to random stuff. Sometimes I'll put on an old Offspring album this time, just to sort of pass the time. And a lot of times I'll put on just playlists that recommend, from Qobuz or from Amazon Music. But yeah, I want something that's like, it's got music about, grass and stuff. I don't know, probably some Snoop Dogg on there.
I'm curious, Qobuz, you can publish a playlist even if you're just a normal person, or do you have to be like have some kind of special access?
I believe you need to have some kind of special access through them, but we'll have to have David Solomon on from Qobuz to answer some of these questions, because I think they're gaining a lot of momentum here in the streaming music service. And I actually saw a very interesting graphic of all the streaming music services. Qobuz pays the artists the most per stream, more than any of the other streaming
and their music. I'm going to say, I give love to Qobuz. They're to my ears, it sounds the best. Even when you're not always getting a high-res file on every single one, they still sound better. Their CD quality, just very impressed with Qobuz. And I actually did sit down while I think I was on the plane. It was someplace where I had some downtime, and I created workout playlists. Qobuz maximum number of songs is 1,000 songs. So it ended up being 4 different 1,000 song workout playlists. It's basically everything I've ever wanted to listen to when I'm working out. I know 4,000 songs sounds like a lot, but it was fun to do.
That's like an ultra marathon for you there. But hey.
Oh, I don't know if I could run that playlist out. It would be hard.
I think so too. All right. Well, before we get to our first giveaway and bring our guest, we did have a couple questions that sneaked their way in here that I wanted to address before we bring David out. And this one I'm going to throw at you, Larry. The first one is from a Gary T. It's from a Gary, so that's why I'm directing it to you. But we may have talked about this before, but can the SVS subwoofer isolation system be used on full range speakers or other components? And what is the advantage of doing so?
Yeah, look at it. I actually have one right here on my desk. So yeah, props. The isolation system is really cool because it can be used on really anything that you can find a use for it for. The initial designs for subwoofers to reduce vibrations and take care of annoyances that a subwoofer can do, tighten up the sound in a room, all kinds of stuff that we've talked about in the past. But you can totally put them under tower speakers, under bookshelf stands in lieu of spikes. There's a lot of different uses for them. I use them down in my living room between my components that are stacked inside a cabinet just for better airflow so it doesn't get hot. If you use them for turntables, most turntables have like a really, really tiny, small foot for each of the corners. And if you're cranking it, that can get a little vibration inside there. So you can take off the feet there and use these instead. And I just threw my focus off doing that too. So that'll be fun for the rest of the show. But yeah, they're fantastic for really anything. And you can use it for any brand sub, towers, bookshelf stands, any of that stuff, like I said, and really anywhere you need a better vibration reduction. So CD players, all that stuff too.
Yeah, I never thought about the ventilation aspect, but if you just need a little bit more clearance to let airflow get in, I guess that could be a solution that goes sort of beyond just the the acoustic properties that it really provides. Sir. So this is an interesting question that Gary, I know you've talked about this before. I don't know about on the happy hour, but C. Norcross asks, and I always confuse the two. What is your opinion on subjective versus objective speaker, amp, or subwoofer testing? How important is it to conduct objective tests? And then, what's the difference between those two kind of tests, when you're talking about different components? And I threw a lot at you there, but
no, I think it's a great, listen, yeah. First of all, I don't expect someone who's interested in buying a pair of speakers or getting, any audio component to bring out their test gear and test them. But and that's how I view objective testing. I guess you could say double blind if you like throw a sheet over them and try to switch between them and you can't see them, I guess that might be considered to be objective. But I actually feel like the optimal way to design and evaluate speakers is a combination of anechoic measurement, in-room measurement, and listening. And I spend tons of time, and Larry knows this, Nick, you know it too. I spend tons of time listening and talking about what I'm hearing with our team, with our engineering. Larry and I do it when we're setting up a demo. In fact, we got messed up because of my travel and didn't get to really do it. And we went through almost a whole morning of getting adjusted and figuring it out together because I was a day late. And how many times have you and I done theaters and 2-channel systems together, Larry? And even so, we still spend time talking about what we're hearing. So I think both are really important, but I think the consumer has to hope that the brand is taking the time to do all three of those, meaning anechoic objective measurement, that's measurement where the room is essentially taken out of the equation, and then measurement in the room, and then of course spending time listening and making sure that what is subjective evaluation, that your ears, which are a very sensitive device, are validating that speaker with content that you know. Larry, you have anything on this?
It's really, the subwoofers are something you can really tell the difference in. Speakers, depending on what you like, it's really, as you said, subjective versus objective.
Both. I say both.
Yeah. And it all comes down. There's certain types of tweeters that I can't listen to because it gets uncomfortable for me. Certain frequencies of bass that I think annoy my wife. And I think it all comes down to personal preference most of the time.
So Gary,
I'm going to say personal preference is part of it, but if the product isn't a great product, and there's this or that person that likes it, I'm going to say, that's not necessarily the most. That's why I say it's a combination of objective and subjective.
So I know from an end user's perspective, when you're auditioning new gear, subwoofer specifically, you look at a little bit differently than speakers. Is that right, Gary, in terms of the objective versus subjective?
I see where you're going with that. So yeah, that. I've always said this. A subwoofer does not have a personality per se. A subwoofer can be boiled down to how well it does 5 things, which we always talk about. A subwoofer has to have extreme low frequencies if it's going to be a great subwoofer, below the threshold of audibility. It needs to be able to play as loud as the user wants it to. It needs to have accurate frequency response, meaning it has the correct frequencies in the exact proportion that's supposed to be there. In our opinion, it really needs to have speed and transients, meaning it needs to be able to keep up with the music and keep up with the speakers. And then finally, it needs to seamlessly blend with the speakers so that nobody wants to hear a subwoofer and speakers. They want to hear a total experience. So if a subwoofer does those 5 things well, it will be a perfect match for any speaker of any brand. It's not a personality thing, which I think is one reason, without patting SVS on the back too much, because we always say we don't want to do an SVS infomercial, but it's one reason why our subwoofers get matched up with lots and lots of brand speakers, even though those brands even make subwoofers, because it's a perfect match for those speakers, and it's probably, we know it's going to outperform the speaker branded subwoofers.
Good answer. And we have one more quick question before we introduce our special guest and have our giveaway. And this is an easy one. Anyone I can purchase SVS from direct in Canada, and electronicsforless.ca, I believe, is the
and Summit Hi-Fi are two go-to.
So there's a couple options out there.
There's a few others. There's also Quebec Acoustique in Montreal.
But from direct, in terms of ordering them online, I think this person may be in an area where they can't get to a dealer. But check those 3, and also our website. If you look on the international dealers, they'll provide links to all those different places. So check that out. All right, our giveaway, very first giveaway of the evening, is our award-winning SVS Prime wireless speaker system, a pair of powered bookshelf speakers here. And the winner of that is Troy Stevens. Troy Stevens, congratulations. You have some Prime powered speakers coming your way. Congratulations, my friend. All right. So our special guest today, as I mentioned before, comes from the pro audio world, and works for Universal Audio, which is just an iconic brand in the world of pro audio in terms of recording and mixing and mastering equipment. He's also the founder and owner of 4130 Mastering. His name is David Roman. He has a much cooler background than we do with all that cool gear in there. But David,
you don't
how
like
you
my Peruvian tapestry, Nick? How dare you?
I mean, it's pretty cool. Don't get me wrong, Gary, but I mean, he just looks like a pro. Am I right?
He does. He looks like a pro. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And David, as we always do, it's probably dangerous to drink anything around all that gear, but anything interesting in your glass this evening?
I'm sticking with Malta, being that I'm pretty much a straight edge guy from birth, so I don't drink alcohol. So this is as close as it gets.
All good. Well, you're like the other two here, and I'm the one outlier, but that's cool. And
but I might switch to alcohol, so that's where right now I'm on Red Bull, but alcohol later.
Yeah, that's going to keep you going. So I want to know from your perspective, and obviously you're involved with making music, but any recommendations you have for our community in terms of things they should be tuning into, or things that might be interesting?
As far as music?
Music or movies, whatever you want to talk about.
Anything you've been watching?
I mean, unfortunately, I don't get to watch too many movies these days, having two little kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. Although my wife and I did get to watch Suicide Squad this weekend, and it was cool. It was unfortunate, and you know, I'm sure all you guys will sort of sympathize with me here, but listening to it through my TV, I could tell that there were a lot of really cool elements in there for surround and whatnot. And my wife doesn't like coming down to the home theater, so I listen to it upstairs on the TV. Which, like,
you got to make her your partner in crime. That's what we do.
I'm pretty bummed out. So I may have to go back and rewatch it just for the soundtrack.
Now, Universal Audio has been around for quite a while, and you know, Gary was chastising me because I was using Frank Sinatra as an example, but it spans Frank Sinatra to Van Halen to Rolling Stones, Kendrick Lamar. Like, your products have been used in the recording and production of a lot of very iconic artists as well, and you've spanned that generation that has gone from all analog to now all digital. And I'm just curious, you know, from your perspective and from the company's perspective, what has that transition been like? What has changed, and sort of how has that evolution taken place, and how has Universal Audio stayed on top of it?
Wow, that's a lot. I mean, I guess, you know, Universal Audio, the company name, just by the fact of the founder of it, Bill Putnam Sr., and then now Bill Putnam Jr., the CEO of our company now. I think, I mean, Bill likes to use the word craftsmanship a lot. I kind of, not that I disagree with Bill, but I kind of see a lot of innovation. You know, it's always been with his father. There was a lot of innovation at the time. It was just innovation in analog. I mean, he was designing compressors. He was designing, I mean, at the forefront of room acoustics and stuff that we take a lot for granted today. Bill Jr. Basically took all that and has essentially digitized it, and he's innovated with digital in that. And basically, I mean, a lot of things, but just one of the things he's done is, you know, spearheaded a team that has gotten really good at emulating analog stuff. And that's not that easy, because you're talking about, you know, even if it seems rather simple as far as circuitry is concerned. For example, we do a plugin on a tube piece of gear that's called the Thermionic Culture Vulture. And really, this is just a box that distorts. It's got a bunch of tubes in it, and it distorts. And it took our chief scientist, Dr. Dave Berners, 2 years to create a plugin emulation of that, simply because if you really think about it, all the harmonics that are in there, the biasing of it, you know, things that are relatively simple in the analog domain, that's really tough to emulate in the digital domain. So again, I just think innovation, and, you know, and we've stayed on top of it because our approach to it is the devil's in the details. So, you know, we don't, there are other plugin companies, other software companies that tend to do a sort of emulation of that piece of gear. We tend to do what we call component level emulation, so that we're basically going through the entire piece of gear component by component and emulating each piece, so that when we get to the end, the sum of those pieces is the piece of gear. And if you adjust something there, you know, it behaves the same way the real thing does. And
just from a general standpoint, I mean, I think the transition to digital has really made the work for people like you easier in some ways, but also given you a lot more flexibility in what you're doing. Can you sort of explain how that has taken place and what sort of transition that's meant?
Some would argue too much flexibility. You know, it's interesting, like, you know, I mean, you know, as you mentioned, I'm a mastering engineer outside of UA. So mastering engineers tend to have a much smaller, you know, collection of gear, right? When you get to the software world, thanks to the fact that it doesn't take up any space, it's a lot less expensive. And, you know, you don't have to maintain it, all that sort of stuff. You just, I mean, you find people that just have every single one, basically, as far as plugins are concerned. And that, you know, sometimes too many options is too much, in my opinion, and in others, it can distract you. However, what's nice about digital gear that's you don't get with analog gear, as I said, you don't have to service it, you don't have to maintain it, you don't have to worry about how long it's turned on. I mean, I love tubes as a guitar player. As a mastering engineer, I've stayed away from them for 13 years. I've been mastering, and I'm about to get my first piece of tube gear. And it's because tubes are so alive. So it's like, you know, you turn on a piece of tube gear, it doesn't sound the same, you know, after 15 minutes of warm up than it does after 2 hours. And when, you know, we're dealing with details in mastering, that scares me. So that being said, plugins, they sound the same now. They sound the same tomorrow. They sound the same 2 years from now when you recall that session. And you don't have to take pictures or take notes of where all your settings are and everything. You don't need an assistant with a Polaroid or an iPhone or anything like that. Everything's there. So easy. It's wonderful.
So when we were talking before, you were explaining to me the difference between tracking, which is basically recording all the different layers to the music, mixing, which is sort of turning those into a cohesive sort of flow, and then what you do, mastering, which is really putting the finishing touches and making it sound as good as possible. My question is, when you're looking for playback sources like speakers and in your case subwoofers, what are you listening for? What is your criteria in terms of which gear is going to be right for you when you're doing that mastering?
Well, for playback, I need it to be brutally honest. Absolutely brutally honest. I mean, if it sounds like crap, I want to hear it sound like crap. If it sounds amazing, I want it to sound amazing, but be brutally honest with me. That's what I need. I need a magnifying glass. The easier it is for me to hear things, the easier it is for me to determine whether or not I need to do something about it.
And right? You mentioned that the low end is often one of the most challenging aspects to get right. And, I'm curious why that is.
I think it's a few different reasons. I think probably number one is room acoustics. And, I mean, even when we had bigger studios, sometimes the room acoustics would just be wrong. Or you had certainly the older way of working was like, if you were an engineer, you were working in this studio today, but you're working in that studio next month or whatever. And, all the studios sound slightly different. So it was very difficult for you to know exactly what you were hearing when you were mixing. These days, we have more of that in the home studio environment. But even though you've got the engineer in the same room, because it tends to be his home or his garage or, something, you're still dealing with room acoustics. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, you're dealing with smaller rooms. And that means you got room modes and, you think you're mixing this big bass heavy hip hop track. And, then you send it to somebody who's got a good room and a good playback system. And they're like, where's all the bass? Mm-hmm. It's like, what do you mean? I heard a ton of bass in my room. Well, yeah, because it's not treated properly and you've got this crazy room mode, right? Then there's, then there's just, then there's the gear itself. And as far as the gear itself, from a sort of processing perspective, there's sort of two different camps. And, either depending on the personality of the engineer and what they're looking for, or depending on what you're looking for specifically in that piece of gear, you're either looking for something that's very transparent and surgical, perhaps, or you're looking for something that's got some color and some vibe. And, if I went through all the stuff that I have, whether it's analog or software, you would see that it basically falls into those two kind of camps. Is it transparent? Is it colored? If it is colored, what kind of color?
Yeah.
And do you actually kind of go back and forth between these different ways of presenting sound? Do you like to evaluate recording and for mastering purposes or mixing purposes?
Do you mean through different pieces of gear?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
just going. We've heard this pretty consistently from recording engineers that they want to hear it through different kinds of gear and hear it and make sure that it's validating itself through every different way that a user would listen to it.
Oh, you mean on playback systems for
Yeah,
translation?
yeah.
I don't do that. There's different thought processes behind that. I think that in most cases where you tend to hear about somebody having multiple speakers, let's just say, it tends to be more in the mixing process.
Right.
You do occasionally see a mastering studio with 2 sets of speakers, but most of the time when you get to mastering, it's like, those are like, they're my eyes, except they're my ears, right? And like, I need just that pair, and I need just.
So they need to be perfect, relatively speaking, perfect and predictable and consistent.
If they are as brutally honest as I need them to be, they will translate everywhere. Now, does that mean it's going to sound, amazing on your phone? No, it's still a phone, right? There's still physics, right? But does it sound as good as it can? Yes. And certainly I've gone through a couple of different sets of speakers. I went from a single subwoofer to a dual subwoofer now with the SVSs. Well, for a long time I've had these. And certainly when I got the pair of speakers I have now, I mean, my revision work and even the speed of my work, it all went down. Brutally honest is wonderful.
And I've asked this question to a couple different engineers. Their answers are always a little similar, but a little different. And I want to just know, why is bass important to music?
Oh boy, bass.
It's a real thought. I know you got to think about this because it's a big answer.
It is a big answer, but I mean, I think I guess if I was going to answer that, I would say, I'm going to assume, to answer this question, that you're talking about really, really low down bass, right? And to me, bass is important. Like when I'm thinking 30, 40 cycles, like basically everything below 50 cycles. To me, it's what makes things both more interesting and more realistic. And if you don't have that bass, it just doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel real. And I don't mean like, the dual 18s in the back of a Cadillac Escalade and, that kind of thing, blasting Paul's Boutique or something like that from the Beastie Boys. Not that kind of bass, but bass nonetheless in those frequencies. I mean, I occasionally will get like a rock band, indie rock kind of thing. And, the bass drum, the kick drum sounds great, sounds punchy and everything, but there's something missing. And it's that, like, again, 30, 40 cycles or something like that. So I might EQ that, or I might need to use a plugin to manufacture that based off of the fundamental in the kick drum or whatever, something like that, and just bring it up just a little, so I can start to feel it from the subs. Not like, again, I'm not trying to turn an indie rock band into, an R&B band or something like that, but when you start to get that, all of a sudden it's like, yes, now it sounds like there's a band in front of me, and that's interesting. Yeah,
that sense of presence and feeling like you're,
totally.
being convinced you're actually surrounded by, the musicians and everything. I think
absolutely,
that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, totally. And then that's the listening pleasure side. Then there's the the production, and in my case, mastering side. And if I don't hear that, or if I don't have the capability to hear down to 20 cycles, then again, how do I know if I need to do something about it, right? I mean, sure, I could grab a high pass filter on an equalizer and just say everything below 30 cycles, goodbye. Put a 24 dB per octave filter or something like that and just lop everything off. But if I can hear down there, I can make the decision whether or not I need to do that, whether I need to change the slope, whether I need to do it at all, and what frequency I need to do it at. Or like I said before, I may need to add a little bit as well. So
over the last year, obviously, a lot of people have started working from home, and you are in a home studio right now. And I'm just curious, what led to your decision to go with the dual SB-1000s versus, say a Pro Audio subwoofer or something that, is more industry facing from your perspective?
There's a few different reasons there. Pro Audio subwoofers, well, a few different reasons, I guess. Number one, I guess, would be a mastering studio it's a professional studio, but it's actually a bit closer to it's as close as you're going to get to a home hi-fi system, in the world of pro audio. And that's because at this stage, again, I'm doing the polish. This is the last step. So I'm trying to sort of mimic a really nice high-end system in somebody's home, but I also need to be able to do stuff with that, right? Because I'm working on the music. So it's pretty close. So in my case, like the speakers I own they're hi-fi speakers, and I've got a hi-fi amp. So it made more sense to have that kind of subwoofer instead of a pro subwoofer. Also, pro subwoofers, the smaller ones, not so good.
Okay. It's a challenge. I mean, it's a real challenge to make a legitimate.
I think he's trying to be nice right there.
Yeah, they're not great, So if you're really looking for pro subwoofers, I mean, certainly they're out there, but they tend to be these big honking things, minimum size of 12, maybe a 15 or something like that. And that's not what I needed. What I wanted was something compact, so that my towers could sit right on them. The sort of mid-range to tweeter would be more aligned with my ear. The fact that I could put the tower on top and I could actually time align the drivers, like that's important to me. I wasn't looking for kaboom, not in this room. I'm looking basically everything that Gary said about the 5 things about a subwoofer. That's what I needed, right? I needed accuracy, full frequency response. I needed, in my case, I wanted something compact, and I needed it to behave as a system. And that's crucial to me, right? Because I'm judging everything off of my playback system. So the SB-1000s were the right size. The specs looked right to me, and certainly everything that I read on the website about the return policy and everything, because I didn't have any place to check them out. It was like, yeah, this makes sense. I'll demo them. And I mean, as soon as I turned them on, I was like, yeah, this works. I'm happy. And I always wanted stereo subs too. And to me, it just made sense because they were so small, so nice and compact.
Well, stereo subs also not eliminate, but sharply reduce room modes, which I'm sure you knew.
Absolutely. Yes. And it also reduces the potential for phase cancellation in a single subwoofer, which
Right.
is something that I was always sort of conscious of and worried about with my single subsystem. So I was sort of happy when my subwoofer started to die.
So, David, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Not as happy as we were.
Oh, yeah, we were happier than you. A couple questions from our community here, and I have no idea if you're going to be able to answer these, but we're going to put you on the spot anyways because
Sure.
You agreed to do this. But this comes from Ed Dents, and he asks, for folks with diminished hearing, would you recommend an equalizer for home use to custom boost frequencies as needed?
Sure.
If you don't know, you don't know. Okay.
No,
and do you make one, I guess, is the other part of that question. Is there a universal audio solution?
No, we don't really make that sort of a thing. But I would say certainly if you have deficiencies and you know what those deficiencies are, I don't see the reason why you wouldn't compensate to, it's your pleasure, right?
Mm-hmm. This is a very model specific question. And again, you have right of refusal here, but they're asking, how does the Universal Audio plan to use the L22 Sphere acquisition, and how will Eric and Chris be involved? If any way, I feel like this one's going off the radar a little bit here. If any way, moving forward. Anything you want to say about the L22 mic?
The L22 mic is, basically it's a microphone. I've got one right over there that can model other microphones, and it can do all sorts of really ridiculously powerful stuff. It actually changes the way that engineers are thinking about using microphones. But that's neither here nor there. I think unfortunately the way I have to answer this is 2 ways. Number one, we never share that kind of information where we're
neither
going
do we.
Yeah. Whether it's a product or a company whose assets we've acquired. I guess what I would say is we acquired them because it made sense to acquire them. It's an amazing product. Mm-hmm. Eric has certainly been in the business for a long time. He worked at, and his father owned Summit Audio, and that's where I met him. So I've known him probably for about 20 years. Again, it's just a great product. The technology was great. So it made sense.
So we're going to jump into a
knows?
giveaway, and then I had a couple other questions that I wanted to wrap up with here. But before we do that, we do have actually the subwoofer we were just talking about, the evolution of that, the SB-1000 Pro. We will be giving that away right now to one Mr. Jared Cole. Jared Cole, congratulations, Vince. We'll get your
Congratulations.
And you got yourself a SB-1000, so you can start your own recording studio. You got your first component there to get in the mix there. So, looking, I think there's been a lot of interesting questions posed, but, for anyone who might be considering a future in the world of, music production or, audio recording, things like that, what advice can you give them to really get themselves started down that path?
The best advice, I think, would be try it yourself, learn yourself. That's my opinion. Sure, there are plenty of schools you can go to, and in some regard, I wish I had gone to school, but in other regards, it's like if you really want the experience, do it yourself. Start playing around, ask questions. I learned all this before YouTube and all that. There's such a source of information out there. Just make sure that, make sure you don't get too, sucked away with things perhaps that are incorrect, because there's a plethora of incorrect information too. But ask questions, find a mentor, try it yourself, and have an open mind, because I meet a lot of people. They tend to be young people, but I meet a lot of people that want to get into the audio industry, and it's all like, they want to be. They want to be in the next Michael Brower or he's a famous mixer, or a famous producer or something like that. They want to be Rick Rubin, or they want to be, whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's tough. That's like me when I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to be Harrison Ford. It's not going to happen, right? But the good news about audio and professional audio, or audio in general, is, I've met plenty of people in the broadcast industries, guys that work at Saturday Night Live and shows like that. And it's like, where they get those guys from? They get them because they're music guys. There's live sound, there's broadcast sound, there's post-production. Who do you think mixes those commercials that you hear on television, so 30s, 60s, and 90s? Man, that pays well. So think about all that kind of stuff. Don't have this myopic view of like, I just want to record rock bands. If you want to do that, that's cool, but you have to know that there's limited positions for that. And, and there's a much bigger world. Look at me. I ended up at Universal Audio and I couldn't be happier.
Well, I know we talked off air, and I don't want to turn this into the Billie Eilish show, but Gary, you'll be happy to know that their original recordings they did at home with Billie and her brother were done with some U-Audio products. So there you go. That's the start that, you can begin with, and now look where they are now.
I think that's a great example of what David's talking about. You don't get the feeling that Phineas, her brother, is like, watching videos and learning. He was figuring it out for himself. You get the feeling, and I guess your equipment, among other things, he was creative, maybe even a genius of how to use it, but he figured it out for himself. And for that reason, and he had something to say, and she has something to say, and for that reason, they're successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we let you go, I did want to give an opportunity to let us know what you're working on, any cool projects that we should be expecting from 4130 or from U-Audio, and what's in store next for you, David.
Oh boy, we're always working on stuff at Universal Audio. We've got some stuff coming this year, both in the hardware and software. Pay attention. That's all I can say. That's as far as I'm going to go, and it's probably too far as it is. And certainly, as far as 4130 mastering, you can follow me on my Facebook page. You can go to 4130mastering.com. I've always got projects coming out. Recently did a record with somebody in the UK that should be coming out soon. That was a lot of fun. Another interesting project that I did was with Darlene Love, who used to sing for Elvis. Hopefully that's going to come out soon. So yeah, always working on stuff.
Very cool. Well, loved having you here. If you want to learn more about U-Audio, check out uaudio.com. You heard him recommend 4130 Mastering on Facebook. David, appreciate your time. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on the SB-1000s and just your work in general. Sounds like a lot of cool stuff you're doing, and the advice I think was spot on. So appreciate it all.
Thanks,
David. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. I think we're up against another giveaway. It's about quarter till the hour, and Larry, you remember what we're giving away now?
Prime Books, dude.
Prime Bookshelves. You got it. So our winner of the pair of Prime Bookshelf speakers is Jason Burkett. Jason Burkett, congratulations. Shiny pair of Prime Bookshelf speakers coming your way. And Eli has been working feverishly behind the scenes to get some great questions here. And I'm sort of, I don't know which one to pick first, but I like this one for you, Gary. This is one I think you can expound upon in an interesting way. Jason Howard asks, any recommendations on how to train your ear technically? I know what I like, but he wants to understand better how to listen, critically.
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, part of it is just invest time in it. And, I can't tell you how much of my life I've devoted to this, literally going back to my college days, I would say this, and Larry knows this too. We have a suite of recordings, maybe 20 recordings, and we're always adding to it, but we add to it very judiciously, like one new thing. And we're very familiar with how the possibilities of those recordings. And then we spend time going around listening to different products with those recordings, and we listen and we talk about what we heard. And you start to get to a place of understanding what the equipment is bringing and what the recording is, what is the equipment bringing something positive in terms of actuating the recording into what it can be. And I don't think that's something you can do quickly or overnight, but if it's something you're passionate about, you will get there. And I would say, listen, we're a virtual community, but you have friends that come over to your house and love great sound. So don't be afraid to talk to people about what they're hearing, because my best experiences in understanding whether equipment is good and understanding how to listen to it is in collaboration. We have, like for myself and Smith, we've done it for many hours over the course of years. And in fact, we brought in Jack Mules, who one of these days we ought to have as a guest.
We did have him once.
That's right, we did.
Briefly, but I think Smith stole his thunder because Smith's so personal.
But the relationship with Jack, part of it started where me, Smith, and Jack were sitting in a room talking about what we heard, and we just knew that Jack was cut from the same cloth and we could figure things out together. And that's also true of Mitch Witten. Who's Mitch ever been on? I don't remember. Oh yeah, he has. He was rambling on about something or other.
But your album, that
right? But I mean, Mitch is another one where we talk about what we heard, and I'm like, "Did you hear that too?" And they're more than willing to tell me, "Well, what you think you heard maybe was this," and we work through it together. And so I would say do that with your friends who are passionate about great sound. You'll get to that place.
I think that's real solid advice. Larry, I got one here for you, and I know you've experienced this firsthand in some of the stores that you've been to, but this, I don't have a name on it, but this person just switched AV receivers, and the bass is no longer as strong or loud as it used to be. Why did this happen, and what can they do about it?
So I will tell you, there's absolutely a difference between brands on the LFE output. There's certain brands that are very different, don't have as much output as another, but you absolutely have to do your recalibration once more, start over from scratch. Don't just plug it in and assume that the new receiver is going to be the same. But, we do a lot of setups, and I start from scratch every time. So put everything where I want it. First thing I do is actually turn down the subwoofer about halfway. And then I run whatever the room EQ is, whether it's YPAO or MCAZC or Odyssey, depending on different brands. They all have different things. And then after it's done, I go back and make adjustments personally. And I will tell you, rarely does a receiver ever cross over the front speakers correctly. It might recognize them as larger because they may be towers or big bookshelves. So it will set them as a large speaker. And if it does that, you're going to miss out on a lot of information that's going to your subwoofer. So I'll tell you, regardless of tower in almost any sense, unless you're using preamps and pro product, you're probably going to be setting your towers or bookshelves to small. and that way your subwoofer can do a little bit more of the work on the low frequency end, and it takes some wear and tear off your receiver as well. But playing with it, adjusting it, and then once your room equalization is done, then you can pull your subwoofer back up a little bit too.
So when you're boosting the output of the sub, are you doing that at the subwoofer level or the AV receiver level or both?
Doesn't matter, right, Larry?
So, yeah, it's more kind of playing with it and see where it feels best.
But I think Larry's point is, I mean, just to say, because I think you said a lot there, so I'm going to say what I heard Larry's process. And he's really good at this, and we do this. I mean, we until COVID hit, we were doing this going from store to store, sometimes 2 and 3 times in a week, and multiple rooms in the store, and each store is different. Or in other ways, trade shows, right? Like ProSource that we just did. What we do, and this is Larry. I mean, I don't want to take credit for this. This is Larry's process. He sets everything up, places it where he thinks it's going to sound good, connects it, makes sure it's connected properly, and then he does do some listening just to make sure that the speakers and sub are optimally placed prior to the room EQ. That's correct, right, Larry?
Yeah, like we did a system we were in a ballroom in a hotel this week, and it was not a great room for acoustics, and we used a PB-1000 Pro, and I started in a corner. I didn't like it, moved it inside. The speakers didn't like it, and then I moved it to the exact opposite wall, and it opened up. And
this was all before you did anything with room EQ, right?
A little bit of both. Yeah, I did it before to kind of listen, and then after I did, I was like, no, I don't like the way it sounds, so I moved it.
And then you set the room EQ.
Yes, and then I did it again.
Just because you're doing it again. I want to keep this I'm trying to make it a linear process so people can follow it. So then you do the room EQ, and then you're not satisfied. You're going to sit and listen to content you're very familiar with and go, is it making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end? Is it doing the things I know it can do, right?
Yeah, I'll put in a movie that I know really well, or a demo track like we do with Cymatics, or Spider-Man Far From Home, or Tron Legacy. We've got all these content that we know really well. And I'm like, nope, that doesn't sound right. And most of you probably have a movie or a musical track that is that way for you. You're like, something's missing. And so you can adjust, and whether it's pulling up levels or pulling down levels or pulling up the volume on the subwoofer or the gain or the channel output where you can go plus and minus, all of that stuff, you can make just adjustments on the fly. But I'll tell you, I've kind of gotten to where now I'm in a room and I can look at a room and kind of gauge where something needs to go. And we've done it thousands of times, so I do have that advantage. But the first thing I do as soon as the room EQ is done is I go in and I immediately change the crossover on the speakers or the size from large to small. That is the first thing I do 100 out of 100 times. And then I'll probably adjust the crossover to about, if your speaker says it goes down to 40 hertz, I typically set it to 60. And I give myself a little bit more leeway there and let the subwoofer do the rest.
And another point about this in terms of, I think it actually circles back to the subjective objective and the how to listen. And this point is there's no such thing as a perfect recording to evaluate all aspects of a system's performance. So what we do, like we'll play somebody wrote Baby Driver there. Yeah, we'll play Baby Driver, but for a specific thing about the bass, in particular with Baby Driver. That, there's some gunshots in that first scene where the bass should be impactful, but very tight and defined. And then for Tron Legacy, that's one where we watch where the robot-looking dude is walking down the steps because it's a very low frequency experience, super subtle. And then so I guess my point is, it's not good at everything. It doesn't define everything great about the system. It just defines certain things. But if you put together 5, 6 different things that are revealing this and that aspect of the system's performance, you will get there.
Great. I think that brings it full circle. So we have a product-specific question here from Neil Hansen, and I'm going to attempt to answer this one, Gary, and you're going to maybe cut me off, but I think I'm
It'll be fun. I won't cut you off.
Pinnacles versus Ultra Towers. Are the Ultras that much better? And my response to that would be that what we did with the Prime Pinnacles, which actually came after the Ultra Towers, was try to get the lion's share of performance into those Prime Pinnacles, but in a form factor that was a little bit more accommodating for room. So, you can't necessarily put the Ultra Towers in a compact sort of home entertainment system where they're flanked by furniture and other things that really sort of block those dual opposing 8-inch drivers. The Pinnacles are a much more traditional loud tower speaker where they have, the drivers on the front, they have 3 rear ports, and they're just much more forgiving in terms of their placement. Whereas the Ultras really sound absolutely phenomenal with a little bit of space around them. But in terms of sheer performance, yes, you're going to get a little deeper low frequency extension from the Ultra Towers. Yes, you're going to get a little bit more dynamic impact. But in most rooms, the Pinnacles are going to be more than what you're going to need. So that's how I would answer that.
I think that's what you did was great. I agree with every word you just said. And I will even say this. Prime Pinnacle, in some rooms, it's not all that you need. They're our best speaker in some rooms. They're better than the Ultra Towers. The Ultra Towers, though, when they're placed in a with as you just everything you said, with air around them, towed in, allowed to live and breathe, then they have this insanely great authority in the low frequencies, and they create a massive, flamboyant, fun to listen to stereo image, which I just love. And so they're both great, but in a difficult room, I'd actually say Prime Pinnacle can be better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like with my boys and my dogs, and we have a stupid room down in our living room because it's long and it's part of the kitchen and a hallway and dining room and stuff, and it's tile, and my TV's in a corner, so it's all the crap that all of us hate when it comes to a home theater setup. But I couldn't do the Ultras down there, and whenever we went from the Prime Tower to the Prime Pinnacle, the room changed, and it really made a big difference down there. And the Pinnacle can give you that very similar to Ultra performance, but as you guys were both saying, much more room friendly, easier to place, and you can do it off of a little bit less power too.
So before we get to our final giveaway, we have a couple more questions, and I'm seeing some really great technical questions that I believe we should probably wait for Ed Mullen to be back on to really get into the weeds with some of these. But I think this one's a pretty quick one for you, Gary. Roger Corbin asks, my question is, how can you run a PB-16 Ultra on a 20 amp circuit when its peak wattage is over what a 20 amp circuit can hold? And there's some magic tricks we did within the amplifier to be able to pull that off. Am I right?
Well, I mean, there's a yes and no to that. I mean, if you actually, it's not even close to a 20 amp circuit. It'll work fine on a 15 amp circuit. So the wattage, it's not, the math there is wrong. I will say this though. We do use in the 16 Ultra series, we use a voltage regulator. You'll never get that on a subwoofer. We did it in order to let it work with predictability and consistency and no problems anywhere in the world, no matter how bad the current source is. But your question is a good one in the sense that at a certain point, if we keep pushing the envelope of performance and power, we're going to need to figure something out about power consumption. And guess what? We're on that path. I'll leave it at that. We're on that path. We're working on that. And it's a really interesting solution we're going to have that I can't wait to talk to everyone about. And I think I've already probably talked too much. Nick's going to kick me off the show.
This is news for me too.
It's really interesting, and it's a really cutting edge, fun thing.
Right. We can squeeze one more question in here before our final giveaway, because this one will be a quick one. I think it's a yes/no. Larry, Michael Marquis asks, will carpet negatively affect the PC-2000 Pro since it's downward firing? Would front-facing be a better option?
There's not really a wrong answer to that. A lot of it's going to come down to your room, too. I mean, most of us have carpet. Yeah, so no. I mean, mine's on tile. I've got the PC-2000 Pro on tile in the back corner of my room, but, in here it's carpet. So Not really so much. If it's super plush and like 8 inches thick, then maybe. But if it's conventional carpet, no.
Well, one thing we did with that product is we put it on the SoundPath subwoofer isolation system, and that kind of is a great equalizer in terms of what the surfaces that it's placed on.
Good stuff. All right. Well, I think we're going to end on that. We did save a bunch of these questions. Eli, mark them down because we're going to bring them back out for our next lightning round with Ed Mullen. Our next broadcast before we do our final giveaway will be in 2 weeks. We're getting back into rhythm here. Thursday, August 26th at 6 p.m. Eastern time, as we always do. Look forward to seeing you guys there. And our final giveaway of the evening is our mighty PB-1000 Pro Subwoofer. Winner is Jason Miller. Jason Miller, congratulations.
Jason,
Subwoofer heading your way. So thank you to David Roman for joining us tonight. Thank you to our awesome community from all over the world who joined us as well. We look forward to catching up with you guys in another 2 weeks. We'll have some more announcements, some more fun to have then. And maybe we'll even do that lawn mowing playlist if Gary lets me. We'll have to see, though. Thanks,
lawn
guys.
mowing playlist. I also want to, just watching the comments go by, Nick, I know you've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting of the show. The comments are just so positive, and they just make me feel so happy that we're all in this together as a community. So thanks to everybody who tuned in.
Thank you, everybody.
Well said. Thanks, guys.